I think Brazil is going to overperform what they did in Iceland. Not because I think that they're anything absurd, but because they simply couldn't do any worse.
And I know that some people, like, you'll see sometimes there's missing talent for certain events. Maybe they're on the announcement. A buddy of mine, you know, he was supposed to go to America. It was the weirdest thing ever. Apparently the guy who was at border control knew who he was, saw the announcement for the event. And he was like, "You're going to work, buddy, aren't you?" So he was.
But there's upset potential with Na'Vi, Liquid, and Giants, you feel, yeah?
Na'Vi, Liquid, Guild, Giants. Yeah, I think those are. So basically,
yeah, EMEA brackets where everyone can win.
Yeah, I'm in the Van Silly camp. I think all these guys are really good players, are really nice guys. I think as long as everyone enjoys themselves, they all get points. They'll get points. They'll get to go to the last chance qualifier. Maybe all the teams can make it in, and we'll have a great, happy family for champions. Woo!
What's good, everybody? It's the week of the 8th of August, and it's time for more Valoranting. I'm your host, Ubershouts, here, joined by Mitch Man as usual, and our special guest now coming on board as a host for today. Anders, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Obviously, Anders, for those that don't know, is the head coach of Virtuoso and also of Thomas College Esports. Anders, first of all, mate, great to have you back on the show here, man. Lots to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to be back. Always a blast with you guys, so happy to be here.
Mitch, you said you had been on a little bit of a break recently, right? You've been trying to chill, been trying to get some time to yourself, mate. But the New World closed beta's over, bro. So what have you been doing?
Man, it's been pretty tough, I'll be honest. But I've rediscovered one of my favorite games from 2 years ago, Splitgate. It blew up in the player base, and so I've been having fun chilling out with some of the Valorant guys on that in between trying to get back to Immortal and failing miserably.
Yeah, I actually got to check Splitgate out a little bit. I was playing with Matt, and he figured out a way that you could basically just like set up your portal so you could aim at the enemy spawn, and they couldn't look through it at you. And you could there's a ton of fun stuff you can do with Splitgate. But yeah, sick game. Really glad that it's back out there and has been playable once more. I mean, today we're obviously in a little bit of a break between, you know, the bulk of our challenges competition and challenges playoffs for all of our regions. So we're at the point now where we essentially are sending our delegates to Berlin. We have one more tournament for most of these regions to decide that. Some already are kind of decided, it's just seeding, but we're going to go back around the grounds and talk about our other VCT regions, right? Maybe reacquaint ourselves with those regions. It's been a little while since Iceland, so some of you may not have been able to keep track with what's going on. Maybe for some of the major regions you are. And there's also a lot of roster moves, right? Because we're in a pretty pivotal moment. A lot of teams have failed to make it to Challengers playoffs, and a lot of teams, as a result of that, are making changes to their rosters now, I guess, as opposed to sort of later on, as they might want to compete and stuff at the tail end of the year. And of course, we will be making our predictions. This time, there's no Van Silly here, so there's no one here to be sort of overly nice and just pick the top team all the time. So we might actually have some fertile discussion about maybe some underdog prospects, as all of our teams are fighting to make it to Berlin. Obviously, it'll be the biggest Valorant event to date, but we'll discuss that, I think, event as well, I think, because there's still some uncertainty around how that's all going to go on down. But first of all, patch notes dropped today. Patch 3.03. It's been, 3 weeks since the last Valorant patch. There's been a few changes, bug fixes, and the like here. You know, worth talking about here. I think Yoru also got a look. So, yeah, Yoru got some changes, I think. Yeah, so they delayed it, right? Well, they wanted to come out in 3.02. Am I correct here? Is there any Yoru changes in 3.03?
So
there aren't, right?
So it's my understanding that they wanted there to be significant Yoru changes, but that they've had to put a full stop on them. Like, I mean, the exact verbiage is what? Indefinitely delayed? I mean, it hurts a lot. Not gonna lie. We've seen a little bit of experimentation with him here and there. You've got a couple of teams in NA that have started running him on bind. I think some LATAM teams were running him on bind even as far back as the qualifiers for Reykjavik, but he's in a bad place, and he has been for a super long time. So to hear that any improvements to him are going to be further delayed, I mean, par for the course, I guess, but it hurts. If you're a Yoru main, you're writhing at this point.
So I know some teams are trying to use them on Breeze there as well, just because of the open nature of the map and like being able to have like fast rotations sometimes. So I suppose that makes sense, but yeah, he's still an issue. There was a bug fix for Viper though in this patch, which was interesting because a lot of the time when I'm watching games in the past, I thought it was just like, you know, like maybe incorrect placement of the sort of the reticle, but there was a bug where Viper's pits start forming at the cursor placement point instead of around Viper. Now, I thought you had a decal that you sort of like that would appear, right? And that you could place it around that. So tell us about what's been going on with this, because this has been an issue for a while, right?
Yeah, so I mean, for people that follow me and my team Virtuoso, it's not a secret that we play a ton of Viper and have for a long time, like longer than almost any other team in all of Valorant. And so we've known about this issue for a super long time, but we genuinely thought that the way it was before was the bug. There were so many inconsistencies and so many issues with the way that Viper ultis were expanding when they were based off of Viper herself that we thought that this new iteration where you were basically throwing the ultimate to your cursor location, we thought that was the intended interaction. We're like, oh yes, this is finally working the way it was supposed to.
Now you had more control, right?
Exactly. Well, there's more intentionality behind it. You were getting the ults that you thought you were getting when you clicked them. Yeah. I'm a little bit concerned that this rollback is going to reintroduce a lot of the bugs that we saw beforehand, but optimistically, maybe this is the best of both worlds where you'll have it working where it's spreading from Viper, but you also won't have the weird inconsistencies that I know that we struggled with for a really long time, specifically on like Bind and Icebox. I could give you a laundry list of bugged ultis there. So hopefully those are long gone at this point.
We've seen it as well. Like a bunch of teams in the EU I've seen use Viper ults, and you can clearly see either this man's an idiot or that has not gone the way that it was intended to. And it's always awkward because you genuinely don't know. Did he mean to do that? Surely not. So yeah, I think I wouldn't call them so much bugs. I think that in Riot's mind, the way that the ulti deploys is correct, because if you do stand in the same spot and aim at the exact same pixel, it will be consistent, but it's very difficult in the game to understand like what pixel is going to affect. If you look 3 degrees to your right, all of a sudden the ult is way deeper than it should be. So yeah, I kind of thought the same when I was playing Viper in ranked. I'm putting down the ults. I'm like, oh, cool. I know exactly where this is going to cover now. And then all of a sudden, now we're going to go back to potentially a little bit of a dice roll every time.
Well, keep an eye out for that. I used to see it on, and we mentioned it before, like Icebox on the A site, where there's like the raised platform that the attackers have access to as they push up before the container you jump across to with the jet or get on the rope. I think I saw Nitro just like beef it completely once. I was like, wait a minute. None of it appeared up on top. It was all on the ground around that sort of area. So we'll keep an eye on that. See if we get any really flubbed Viper ults coming up in these challenges playoffs. There were some more updates as well here. Again, so you can change your ADS crosshair and your sniper scope center dot. So as opposed to just your hip fire crosshair, which everyone could sort of change. Also, Radionite crates are now penetrable with the right weapons from all angles. Were they not penetrable beforehand? I feel like I saw people shooting through them in quite a few occasions, like when on C-site retakes on Haven and such like that.
Yeah, so it was this weird inconsistency issue. If you look at them graphically, I mean, Radionite crates, for context, if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, it's the green hued crates that you see all over a bunch of different maps. When you look at them, they have these triangular metal panels on some of the corners, and there was inconsistent pen characteristics if you were shooting the green texture as opposed to that metal texture.
Right.
And so what, at least the way I'm reading this change, is they're now creating it so that no matter whether you're shooting that weird metal surface or the green surface, you're going to have a consistent penetration mechanic on these boxes, which there's a couple spots where that's a big deal. Like the ones that immediately came to mind for me is if you're retaking B site on Ascent, the double stack on site, you can now spam that right as you're leaving spawn, and you don't have to worry about working your way around that weird metal panel that was blocking the far right corner. You've got the double stack on C site Haven. That's going to be a completely different dynamic now. I mean, there's a couple places where this is
behind that.
Yeah, there's a couple places where this is going to be a huge deal. So I think it's like the sleeper highlight patch note here.
Yes, interesting. There's also some data mining as well done by there's Valorant Leaks Twitter account. I mean, if you got 300k followers, you probably had foreshadowed some of this stuff correctly, right? So essentially, yes, what's data mined is, I assume, text strings describing what is a inbuilt tournament system, which we kind of knew that would be on the cards for Valorant because it exists in League of Legends in the form of Clash, and we've talked about it on the show before, but this is a little closer. I'm not saying it's a confirmation, but it's definitely a little closer to something like that. It looks pretty good, right? And the difference here, though, is that it seems as if there is a feature where you can list yourself as a free agent, or sort of look for teams that are hunting for a free agent and sort of join up with them, which is kind of interesting because I know really recently a service called teams.gg launched, which like kind of matches you up with players and helps you find a team in Valorant and stuff like that. Seems like in game there will be a system to try and marry teams and players up, which is great. So not just the automated tournament system, which I thought worked really well, but in Clash it was never that serious, right? It was kind of just hang out with your mates on a Sunday afternoon and clown around in a Clash game. Whereas in Fortnite, their automated tournaments are designed to serve a purpose for distributing prize money and qualifying for events. So like, Fortnite uses their automated tournament system much more heavy-handedly than Clash is for League, where it's more of just a thing to do. So I'm curious here, is this like the industrial revolution for TOs? I'm curious to see how far Valorant tries to go with this automated system,
I think that's a natural progression, though, to actually integrate in these kind of Battlefy and all these other platforms that you're currently using. You're essentially trying to get a player who likes the game. They first of all need to they first of all need to get awareness of the esports scene. They need to know that there is an esports scene, and currently linked into the game. Sure, you'll have the couple of articles here and there, but there's no direct way into esports through gameplay, if that makes sense, unless maybe you meet a pro and they ask you to join their team. Like,
sure,
the exception to
it's
that
very
is ranked.
networking heavy, yeah.
It's not going to happen every single day. So it makes sense that, this is something that I think Fortnite did incredibly well, which is embedding streams within the games of their major tournaments and stuff. That just seems to be a no-brainer. Again, we have kind of like these articles that link to the main event. You can sort of get exposed to it that way. But if there's an inbuilt tournament system that goes from like $5 prize pool cups, maybe free entry, just free ones at the start, you're messing around, you maybe win 50 cent, a dollar, whatever it is, and then it amps up to, and then there's monthly qualifiers for this kind of tournament where they invite some pro teams or whatever. That could be really, really cool to introduce people, motivate you to get 4 of your buddies, hop on Valorant, go and try in this shitty tournament, then slightly less shitty, and who knows where you'll end up.
I think it could open some really interesting doors depending on how sort of which fork in the road they decide to take. Obviously, you've got like League of Legends Clash, which to Uber's point is like stick around with the mates on a Sunday. Like you're just having fun. It's do whatever. Then there's the Fortnite version, which is far more hardcore, a lot more progression focused. I think that there's a cool little middle road. I think one of the things on that data mine tweet was that there's a tournament shop, which leads me to believe it's probably going to be more in the realm of a Clash where the rewards are going to be predominantly in game,
exclusive rewards.
Yeah, exactly. So my initial inclination would be to say it's going to end up more in the realm of Clash, but at the same time, because of how VCT works and the prerequisites in order to compete, it's everyone on your team has to be immortal. I could see a world where this system opens a door for more teams. I mean, I'm sure that having operated as a collegiate coach for as long as I have, I know that there are diamond stacks out there that would absolutely lay waste to full immortal stacks and even some immortal radiant mixes. So maybe if you reach a certain echelon in this like pre-made 5-stack tournament ecosystem, you can go directly into VCT, not by like a saved slot or anything.
Change the way that ranked works as well.
Like exactly. It would put an actual carrot behind the system, other than just, hey, I have bragging rights because leaderboard.
There's also There's also another problem that needs to be solved, right? And you see millions of tweets a day about it. It's you can't 5-stack when you hit D3, and it's so damn annoying when, you know, you're that friend or one of your friends hits that rank, you're all D2, you're in your 5 stack, you're having a great time. One of your buddies is D3, boom, the whole thing falls apart. And I think now with this sort of integration, if we actually get a face it style system, that's what I could see being the end goal of this. If you look at other, sure, I'm sure Riot are going to look at League and they're going to look at other things like that where they've predominantly been in. But there's no secret that I think a lot of research has been done into Counter Strike, and it's obviously the closest thing that it's a clone of. So if you're taking a lot of the player base and a lot of the professionals, what it must be 90% are XCS, certainly the ones succeeding at the top level. It makes sense to look at the platform that is most successful, like your ESEAs, your Face It though in particular. They have, you know, constant ladders that you can play in that promote you playing individually. That, I mean, you're going to get more points if you're winning games, and that's going to happen with a 5 stack. So it just naturally pushes everything towards that end. Plus, then you've got the prizes of skins and whatever else that you can get out of it, and a car if you play just a stupid amount. So I would love to see that. I would love to see like an integrated Face It platform, not necessarily you know what I mean, Riot's own.
That would require them
take
giving API out, which they don't like doing, I mean, very much.
Riot doing it in game, if they actually set it up similar to what Fortnite has, because they have their ladders and all that just inside the game. If you want to run a Fortnite tournament like Ninja does it with the Ninja battles, those are actual things in the game that you can sign up to through the menus, and you play it all through it. So if they like made a Face It system of their own and it was just in the game already, I think that's like the number one thing that ever limited ESEA, that ever limited Face It, is that they're not run by Valve. They're run by third-party organizers. So it would be insane if Riot actually did that
now
themselves.
We're mining Bitcoin in the kernel of people's. Yeah. You know, I'm just putting. Okay, big shout out by the way to Vanity, who just gave us a host. We're talking a little bit about some of the patch notes today and just some of the updates to the game. We'll get to the Vanity rumors soon. Don't worry. Yeah, okay, we'll see how it plays out. The Give Back bundle, if you'll remember, which was the sort of community voted bundle, raised $5.5 million. It goes to the Riot Games Social Impact Fund. That's pretty crazy. So obviously, hotly desired weapon skins, like of course the Ion Operator, which everyone seemed to want, and obviously some more the Reaver skins made their comeback. Great initiative. Good on you guys for raising that money. What I like about this is, yeah, it is a fund that sort of, I guess, basically Riot aren't saying, you know, the end recipient of this fundraising, but it allows them to sort of say, hey, this is a pool with which we can partner with a bunch of different organizations and sort of support them. So I like that. Obviously, we don't know a ton about who's getting this sort of raised money yet. I'd like to hope that, you know, they're sort of keeping us updated about that. I can't imagine that they wouldn't sort of do that. But yeah, great initiative, and it's great to see them make some money. I want to talk about Berlin a little bit, not the teams necessarily, but the event itself. So there was a tweet a few days ago from LOL Esports. Now, for those who don't know, there was going to be the LCS Championship was going to be held in a live arena in a Jersey? No, the Prudential Center, I think. They had to cancel that essentially and move it back to their studios. So because of obviously the rise of the COVID-19 cases, plus the concern from sort of the efficacy of the Delta variant, and people just aren't getting back, so it's whatever. They've decided not to hold the championship at the Prudential Center. It's all happening at the LCS arena, where obviously they have more control over who comes in. Maybe no one comes in. Maybe there's no crowd. Who knows what the regulations in Los Angeles County are at that time. This comes at the same time as a Call of Duty League event occurred in Arlington, Texas, at the Esports Arena, in which multiple pro players announced they contracted COVID-19 after the event. These are the players who were so shocked, in fact, that they contracted COVID after, I don't know, sitting in the fucking crowd of people without masks after they got, without getting vaccinated, after their games were done, and they're shocked that they got COVID. And then there were people who posted on Reddit saying, oh, it's weird, man. Yeah, like I went to this CDL event and then I tested positive for COVID, you know, kind of a little bit annoyed, you know, like kind of wish that, you know, like, fucking dumb people. Jesus fucking Christ. You know what? Put them all in a CDL event. Put all the unvaccinated folks in one fucking CDL event and let them just watch. You know, Scump literally said he got COVID from that event. Now it might not kill him, so we hope not. But that event, I don't know if that was the impetus for this, but I want to read you something that was written in this fucking Riot Games thing. And oh god, anyway, this is reading from that tweet, the sort of article posted about it. While we expect other shows and sporting events to press on through this period, the LCS does not need to take health and safety risks in order to produce its core competitive product. Really? Really, guys? Do you have to be so fucking smarmy about it? Like, just you can just cancel your event without virtue signaling about how fucking great you are. Like, oh well, the other esports might need crowds to make their esport make sense, but we're fucking better than that. Fuck, you can't stop being so fucking smarmy. All right? How about just protect people like you've been doing, but you don't have to jerk yourself off about it. Hey, you know, such a fucking Riot Games thing. Christ on a bike. Anyway, what does this mean for Berlin, right? Because they haven't announced anything about it, but I know that Europe got. You fucking. What are you red in the face, Mitch? What's going on? You like okay over there?
Sitting here, I just want to say that Uber's opinions are his own. They do not represent DMP, nor do they represent my views. I love you, Riot. Thank you. That is all. Thank you.
Slurp. But what does it mean for Berlin though? Like, because they haven't announced anything about this event, but we know that Germany was impacted by COVID-19. Yeah, but we know that Riot are exploring, having a crowd for Masters in Berlin. But is that now in jeopardy?
I don't think so. Because the cases in Germany have been kept pretty low over the last kind of month or so. I think they've done a pretty good job of recovering on it. And from what I hear, the people, whether it's the people who work in the studio that we've been working with in Germany, or just other colleagues and stuff like that, that it seems to be very well respected over there. Like, there's not a lot of people walking around without masks or anything like that. Basically, from what we hear, the Germans have brains, which is cool. I wish we could get some of those in Ireland. But if the cases keep on track with the way they are, as long as things don't get drastically worse, I think we're good. But with the Delta variant around the corner, I mean, you never know. You never do. Especially now the countries are starting to open up. I know here in Ireland, we're getting much more open. I don't know exactly what the plan is for Germany over the next couple of weeks. But if things do loosen up and people start being fuckheads again, maybe it does end up getting knocked on the head. So let's just hope that it doesn't.
In the US, like, for example, this CDL event was held in Arlington, Texas, right? In that state, you cannot bar entry to people not wearing masks. I think nice. Texas has like literally produced legislation that doesn't allow people to restrict access based on whether they have masks or whether they're vaccinated or something like that. It could be a vaccination status thing. So it was mentioned in the chat as well, like by AFED, just like, force people to show that they've been vaccinated. The US have such a turgid erection for freedom that people like, I don't know, DeSantis and Ted Cruz, who are, governors or senators or whatever, the ruling individuals of these states will just be like, no, we're going to make it impossible for people to mandate vaccination status to allow people to partake and stuff like that. So maybe in Europe it's a different story, because I mean, from what I spent 3 years living in Germany, I can guarantee you that the people that run that place care a little bit more about humanity and stuff like that. So I really hope there is an audience, because Riot put themselves in a position now where they kind of say, well, yeah, look, we as the morally superior arbiters of truth and justice and in esports are not doing this event because we care about people, and we need you to know that. But Berlin is still potentially on the card. So they obviously have set themselves up with like a PR situation they sort of need to navigate. I look, if it's safe, I'd love to see a crowd in Berlin. It's going to be the sickest Valorant competition to date, right? I mean, that would just really put the cherry on top while I sit in my garage in sweltering heat, casting online esports.
Gotta get some aircon, man. That portable AC I bought.
I got a fan, bro, but like, fans if I turn it up too high, it comes through the mic. It's just kind of. I mean, I know that I think in the UK, I think they're just not going to lock down again. They're like, I mean, at this point, like, people are just they're going to lose their mind.
Boris did literally say at one point, he was like, I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, some of you will die, but The rest of us will be all right. It was the way the UK handles it.
He literally went the Lord Farquaad route.
Yeah, I was gonna say
that is a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
With it. I mean, then he got it like right afterwards. He was like, no, it's absolutely fine to open the restaurants. There's no problem. Gets COVID the next day. Okay, cool. Sweet. They're a bunch of morons, but hey, seems like everyone is these days.
Yeah, Christ. All right. Let's carry on, hey. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other regions in the VCT. Because obviously we will be seeing a few potentially returning names. We don't know for sure yet who these other regions are going to be sending. Some regions have actually locked their delegates in. It's just a matter of seeding. But we'll start with Japan, who, they sent Crazy Raccoon to Iceland. And look, that team is still very much a prospect. A little bit of hype in building around this Zeta Division team, not only because they just look really cool. All of them just look like cool guys. But yeah, obviously, Crazy Raccoon in a position here to sort of make some waves. But this was not a team that really blew our minds. And this is also a team, I believe, with those two Korean players as well, right? Like Bazzi and Medusa, I think, are Korean nationals here. So we still hope to see them, of course, and see what the Japanese region can produce. But they had a bit of a rough go in Iceland.
Yeah, they didn't do too hot over there. I think, again, this is one of the teams that regionally they were able to do a lot, but when they went to the international stage and just see how some of these other teams, NAEU in particular, were playing, that they weren't able to keep up pretty much. And we knew that was going to be the case, the first ever clash of international teams. But I think at the same time, we saw these guys adapt a little bit as the tournament went on. Didn't really get that many opportunities to do so, unfortunately. It was a bit cutthroat, but I'd say they're in with somewhat of a chance moving forward. Like if they make it to the international stage, they face off against some of these teams again. I think they will have learned enough that they won't be blindsided this time around.
And I think they've made changes to their roster as well. It is a different looking Crazy Raccoon than we saw in Iceland, right? I'll check it. You know what? I'll do a classic VCT pre-match move and look it up on VLR.
Yeah, they did. They brought in a couple of new guys. I think with Rion and Zephyr out, it's not going to be huge for them. I still see a lot of potential in this roster overall, and certainly within Japan, they've been destroying going through challengers. So I give them a bit of props, but again, I'm not too sure about them stepping up to the international stage. The same thing as when it comes to like X10, when you got a couple of changes there, some very important ones. I think is it Patafan isn't going to play for them anymore? That's right?
Yeah, well, I think we'll get to that, but I think he announce he had an injury, and he was actually stepping back for a while.
Another wrist, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. So this new addition to, or they've changed this roster. Previously, it was Medusa and Munchkin, right, on this Crazy Raccoon roster, who were Korean players. They've added Bazzi, who I know, as he was a hitscan player for the Hangzhou Spark for quite some time. So it's another Overwatch survivor coming across and joining this team. So that adds another. And I'm pretty sure he's pretty well known to Munchkin, who they played together a whole bunch, I think. So, okay. So look, he was really highly regarded as like a mechanically strong sort of DPS player, and then he ended up playing Brig, and that just killed his career and desire to play the game at all. So, I mean, good to see him on this Crazy Raccoon team, and obviously a little bit of a facelift for this roster. They're looking good so far. I'd be interested to see how they sort of stack up against regions like Brazil, because we had such high expectations of them, Anders, coming into Iceland, or at least those maybe that knew less about how that region operated. But Brazil came into Iceland with a very solid idea of how they wanted to play, and it just turned out to be frankly wrong. They didn't have a chance to practice against what we knew as the meta in their home region. They stuck to their guns, which we respect, and then they heroically were vanquished. So you probably deal a little bit with more LATAM North teams. I don't know if you really get a chance to scrim against Brazilian teams, but what are your thoughts here on how that scene's shaping up from what we know?
So it'll definitely be an evolution from what we saw in Reykjavik. They came in with tons of hype, and it was almost exclusively rooted in the fact that they had this super high pace, this aggression that was just utterly gobsmacking. Like the util comes out, they hit the site, you're dead no matter what. And then they got to Reykjavik, and it's like, hold up, EU and NA are both playing like Astra semi-control-y styles, and it just like hard stops us. Like our crazy Brazilian aggression just gets grav-welled, and we don't know what to do anymore. and their ability to sort of pivot and have sort of additional branches to their protocols didn't seem to be there to the level it needed to be. I imagine that they've made significant adjustments in that regard. I mean, we'll probably talk about it more in a minute, but specifically to that point, we had Sharks boot camping in Serbia to play against EU teams to address those exact issues they've already encountered.
This is wild.
They knew that these more control-y styles, these more disciplined, fundamentally sound setups were going to beat their admittedly phenomenal execs. And so they're saying, we need to make sure we aren't going to have an Iceland repeat. Let's go figure it out. So the steps are being taken. Whether or not they pay dividends is yet to be seen.
I mean, this team traveled over 6,000 miles for boot camp. That's fucking mental. I guess they get a chance to scrim against these European teams, right, Mitch? So they're also getting blindsided by a metagame that was more developed than they realized is much lower now, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at this very analytically, very objectively. Okay, I'm going to remove any bias from the situation. This team wants to get better. They want to understand what the best way to play this game is, and so rather than playing North America, who just bear with me, it would cost them $0, right? They could just play the North American teams from where they are. So rather than playing the North American teams, they traveled 6,000 miles to play the EU teams, which presumably cost a lot of money. Wow. Well, I don't know what that says about who the best teams in the world are, but I will say that if they are the EU teams, which evidently the Brazilians seem to think they are, that definitely puts them in a better spot, that they won't get blindsided by a meta. And I think it's very forward thinking of them to not just look at how teams are playing online, look at the officials and go, okay, this is how they're going to play, to actually move over and start to scrim against them. Because even if the top teams really go out of their way to mask their hand against you, you're going to get a good idea of how the general scene is playing by scrimming those tier 2 teams who are regularly facing the kind of more hard versions of the Fanatics and all these kind of guys. So definitely a really solid move for them. Again, like we said, we got to see if it pays off, but I love that as an idea, and I love to see teams put in that kind of effort.
Why? Okay, so Mitch has definitely made his opinion pretty clear. I'm impressed with I mean, when you bear the stature of Mitch McBride, you learn how to make anything into a soapbox because it's very practical. And why do you think they didn't go to NA? Is there like what do you think is there a reason that they? I mean, I think there are some practical reasons that we can think of, right?
So dog shit. Me being the overly logical person that I am, this is the train of thought that I would go through with them. Is they historically are a very aggressive region that has phenomenal aggression. NA is a fairly balanced region in that they don't have like superb aggression or superb control, but they have great elements from both. And EU is very much so like a incredibly fundamentally sound, highly structured region. And so if Brazil already has aggro to a level that is on par or debatably in some cases better than what they'd see in NA, and they're looking to get the other side of the coin, they're not going to go to NA and get the middle ground. They're going to go to EU and get the best of that categorical strength.
Gotcha.
So
I fucking, you two dickheads you've just missed a slam dunk. The cunts can't get into America. What do you think they're fucking letting Brazilian nationals just walk into the US?
You're not wrong. Fair enough.
Serbia doesn't give a fuck.
Serbia because in Serbia.
You walk up to a Serbian fucking immigration guard with like €20. He's not even going to need to see a fucking passport. It's like, yeah, they're good to go in.
I love it. It says so much about you, Anders.
I'm over here like pulling out the Excel spreadsheets, and it's like, no, they just couldn't get in, man.
Yeah, I mean, I have not been to Serbia, so but Mitch, you've been to Serbia.
I've been to a couple of similar countries as well, and I'll say most things fly if you have a little bit of extra cash. That's I have witnessed someone blatantly smuggle illegal products across the line by handing money to someone. It's an interesting part of the world.
You know what also flies, boys? The COVID-19 virus. Just saying. Let's move on. Let's talk about LATAM and SEA. So first of all, talk about X10 because recently we obviously had that announcement that Patapan, with his wrist injury wouldn't be competing. I mean, you got the cream of the crop here, boys, in SEA. When you've got X10, you've got Brent Esports, and then Uwu at the top of Group C. I mean, the only the creme de la creme here to turn it up in SEA.
It's a hell of a name as well. Uwu. Wow. They really went for it. But I got to say, man, Brent's been around that region for quite a while at this point. I'm really interested to see, though, if Patafan makes a return. I know his wrist is injured, but we saw from Solcus when he was on an injury, potentially not playing, and then he came back a few days later. So it'd be great to see Patafan be more on the Solcus side than on the Akuko side. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. I mean, if the guy keeps doing cartwheels, though, I don't see his wrist just, coming good all of a sudden.
True.
But how could you stifle such vivacity? You know what I mean? You can't deny us that. All right. So, yeah, not a lot of info for us on the SEA region. At this time, they're playing in, a very different format. I mean, their qualifiers looks like it's going to be 4 groups. So I don't really know even how that looks. Let's talk about LATAM because obviously now, and this is probably a region you have some more experience with just because proximity, there's a chance to maybe scrim some of these teams. So let's talk about Crew because they, much like many of the other teams from these regions, just didn't really put up much of a fight.
Yeah, so Crew and Austral. So the LATAM South teams are the ones that I'll have less information on. I mean, I directly scrim both of the LATAM North teams, but in Crew's case, I mean, this might be BM to frame it this way, but for most intents and purposes, most people see them as like Brazil light. They have a really similar play style. They scrim in the same groups as Brazilian teams. And so oftentimes they're just like the slightly worse version of the Brazilian representatives. Whether or not that holds true is going to be interesting to see, but I mean, that's what it has sort of proven to be historically and sort of where my expectations would be going into this.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know to what. Do you know to what degree sort of these LATAM and Brazilian teams scrim each other? I imagine it's probably fine, right?
I know that Crew in particular scrims Brazilian teams constantly. Like I remember interviews with Gamelanders players and Vikings players about how frequently they would scrim Crew and how good they thought Crew was, and how if Crew was a Brazilian team, they would have been like a 3rd or 4th place, maybe even a 2nd place representative going to Reykjavik. So like, again, this is probably the wrong way to frame it and look at it, but I see them as an extra Brazilian slot if they make it, to be completely blunt.
They looked really good on pistols, right? I think that was one of the things that we identified about Crew is that they smashed Fnatic on pistol rounds, and then that was kind of it, really. This Klaus guy, I know him again. Guess what? Ex-Overwatch player from Argentina, just insane. Really very talented. He represented that country in multiple World Cups, and really stood out as like a game-changing, put the team on your back kind of force. So definitely a lot of talent here in LATAM. Hopefully they can actually leverage some of that to make more of a mark or a deeper run here. I mean, we know that sort of, they scrim Vikings a whole bunch. So I think Sasi was on, and maybe Sardak was on Backchat at some point where they talked about that a little bit. I think that's pointed out by Rusted Silver in the chat. So there we have it. Let's talk about Korea though, because we didn't exactly get the delegates we thought we would for Iceland, right? You ended up seeing Newturn at this event. Newturn, though, more of a downturn. They struggled against Damwon Gaming and lost that in a best of 3 here. Now, we already have our 2 representatives for South Korea locked in. We just need to decide the seeding. So basically, it basically turns the seeding into a bit of a show match. It will matter because of the density and just the talent of the teams that they'll be going up against, but they've already essentially booked their tickets there. F4Q, as it's being pointed out here by Hippie T-Boy and is sort of the kind of the vibes, it's kind of this sort of streamer team, you know what I mean? Like, not quite a mean team necessarily, but definitely maybe not an expected roster to make it through.
Yeah, this is something that really surprised me because I've been speaking a lot with some of the people from the Korean scene. Shout out Buddha, been giving me a lot of information on the DL, and I think like I expected a lot from Vision Strikers. I don't know who didn't. Like you look at the roster changes they're making. You got Lowkii in. It's good to go. So we finally get to see them make it through. But New Turn losing to Damwon, not a huge surprise to me. That team last time they played, that New Turn won 3-0. I remember constantly bringing up the fact that it was double digits on every single map. Like a pistol round going Damwon's way, game flips on its head, and it could have been a New Turn out. So you very easily could have seen Damwon make it to the last Masters. Then they come to this stage, they beat New Turn. I'm like, cool. It's gonna be Vision Strikers and Damwon. I can go play some Splitgate. We know what's going on. And then you come back on, it's like, what? A team called Fuck has beaten them. What the fuck is going on? So that's one that definitely needs to be reviewed. But I'm blown away, honestly, and it just goes further to say how much depth there is, because I can tell you F4Q were not on my, I would say, top 5 list, and now I'm gonna have to figure out a way to say their name, I guess.
So they're
it is F4Q, right?
It's who the hell knows? I mean, I call them FAC, but I doubt that is correct. Yeah.
Far out.
I'm in a similar position where, like, I've followed every scene just for data gathering purposes, so I knew this team's name. They've been around for a long time, and there's been enough roster juggles where I didn't necessarily explicitly know who was on their team until they qualified, and I looked up the lineup and I was like, wait a minute, I recognize some of these names. Bunny, who is like one of the best raises on Earth in terms of just like wild mechanical clips, is on FAC, as well as Esperanza, who was on the super old school T1 Korea roster before it disbanded. And when he was on it, I considered him like one of the best breaches on the entire planet. So the fact that he is showing up on their roster, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I know these guys. Them making it through doesn't seem completely out of left field when you start looking at the components. So
yeah, I mean, this team, again, more Overwatch refugees. Bunny was like a sick tracer player, right? So you can kind of see the carryover here. Zunba also was like a sort of, it was an off-tank player, considered for a while to be one of the best Zayas. So he had really good tracking and was just like really dominant in the early years of South Korea's. He was like a World Cup winner, champion with that team. So yeah, these guys are sick. I mean, we have to talk about Vision Strikers briefly here. Is their side of the bracket looks much easier, much cleaner as well. The addition of Lowkii to this team, definitely seems to have given them quite the facelift. So looks like they're back. It looks like they mean business. I'm looking forward to seeing which team sort of picks up the higher seed here. But I feel like from everything we know, there's no reason that Vision Strikers don't win this upcoming best of 5. I think it's happening on the 15th of August, local time. Vision Strikers will play against F4Q.
One quick thing, TNL was a shock because I had heard a lot about them. I'd heard they were going to be a really, really strong team. Vision Strikers dismantled them. That was a really surprising series for me, because I was seeing at least 3 maps out of it, from what I'd heard, the hype around them. But I take that not to mean that TNL necessarily underperformed, but just to really show the strength of Vision Strikers right now. So I agree. I think that realistically on paper, this should be them taking that upcoming series. But it all goes out the window when you realize that it just doesn't fucking matter. Like, the game doesn't matter. So it all depends on what Vision Strikers think. If they come in going, hey, we want to fucking win this, we want to look dominant, maybe it's going to affect seeding, and that could be a big thing. Then yeah, I expect them to win, but they could also just start fucking around.
Damn, I love this stat in chat from Diamond. Lowkii hasn't lost a map in Korea since stage 1.
Oh.
That is a mental stat for domestic dominance.
Yeah.
Christ on a bike. That's mental. All right. So, okay. How do you think then things will spin out for some of these lesser covered regions in Reykjavik? Is there a region that you think is going to be able to significantly exceed their previous showing in Iceland?
This is the most trap take I can possibly make, but I think Brazil is going to overperform what they did in Iceland. Not because I think that they're anything absurd, but because they simply couldn't do any worse.
I mean,
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
it was fucking bad. They said it. It was fucking bad for them.
It's harsh, but it's true. Like they should have taken lessons away, and they should, based off of like the depth of their scene and the amount of practice that they have access to, they should have been able to grow faster than some of these other regions. Like they shouldn't get absolutely outshone by like an X10 or a Full Sense or a Paper Rex or an Uwu, whoever the heck comes out of SEA. Like they should be a clear like fourth best region in the world at worst, in my opinion. And I'm not sure that that argument was made effectively in Iceland, and it should be.
No, it wasn't. They were absolute dog shit. I think EMEA having 4 slots, I can't really cry because, you know, as much as I want to say we should have a Brazilian slot, yeah, maybe 5 would be a bit much. NA having 3, but the fact that Brazil has the same number of slots as Korea blows my fucking mind. It's a conversation that I think can be had again and again, and Riot are being very nice to some of these regions by giving them so many slots. And I guess it is just good faith that in the early days, maybe it will promote growth in the scene and get these teams to perform at a high enough level. But from what we saw, things kind of went as predicted, and it just meant that, you know, the second team invited was just a fucking embarrassment.
Right. I mean, but yeah, I guess they're using, you know, previous tax shooters competition and internationally to try and gauge how a region will eventually develop, which is fine. It is arbitrary. I think we can all agree to that. That's not tethered to a specific demographic, or it's not, you know, like it's not based on population necessarily, or anything like that. So it's fine. At this point in this first year, them trying things out is acceptable. But yeah, obviously, if Brazil turn up and they shit the bed again, then there will be questions about, you know, whether this region should be able to send so many delegates. Mitch, you have you've got a bit of a chance here to talk to the situation happening in Europe right now, because you mentioned that you're a little bit concerned about the lack of European tournaments outside, of course, of VCT.
Yeah, I mean, I know one of the main things. There's 2 main things from a team side, at least an organization looking in on the scene that they will want out of their team, and that's kind of like top 10, top 15, like on the rankings. As bullshit of a thing as that really is, a lot of people put faith in them, or at least, you know, if you're number 1 in the rankings, you're not dog shit. Is in theory how it works. The other thing is VCT placement and being able to qualify for the main events. And obviously, up until this point, it has been wide open for any organization to potentially, if they come in, if they invest enough, if they get good enough players, they can make it to champions at the end of the year. That's no longer possible. Obviously, now it is closed off for the rest of the year, in that we have the remaining qualifiers for Masters, then we have Masters, then we have a last chance qualifier, the eligibility for which is already defined by how many points you have, and there's no way to earn more points if you're a new team entering, so you're not able to participate in that. And then obviously there is champions itself. So basically, from now up until December, if you're a new organization looking to come in, you have no opportunity to participate in the main tournament system. And the problem with that is that also applies to teams who have been knocked out. You're not in the top 10 of your region, you're fucked. You're not going to be in the last chance qualifier. Some of the teams that are there aren't even going to be there, of course, because there's limited places for each region. So the reality is, for some of these teams, some of these organizations, and I tweeted out, I think in particular, like Heretics, Alliance, BDS, and a couple others are all on that chopping block where they now have nothing until maybe January, February, March, April. We don't know. There's no, next year isn't announced yet. So as an organization looking in on that, let's say, for example, you're paying your team 10K a month. You're dipping 10K a month into, and for some it's going to be a lot more than that, but let's say 10K a month. You're now going to be spending for 5 months minimum, maybe 6, maybe 7, maybe 8. So now you're 80K in the hole by the time the next series comes up, and you have a team that hasn't played that many officials because there's only a couple tournaments here or there. Well, why are you paying 80K? You know, drop the roster and rebuild it later when other rosters have also dropped, and you can now get players way cheaper.
Free
than
agent
you
pool
would've.
looks much better. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That is what makes sense. And the thing that we need to stop that from happening, to stop these organizations from fleeing and affecting the ecosystem locally of each region massively. I mean, if you stop so if the orgs fuck off, the players are going to fuck off eventually. You know, they need income. You can't do 5 months of the year if you're not, you know, the top 2 teams in your region. You don't get any money, you know, you don't get food on the table. You can't be doing that. So now all these kind of tier 2 teams, especially tier 1s that haven't qualified, organizations leave, the players leave, and now the whole ecosystem kind of falls apart, and we lose a lot of the skill that we have within Valorant in general. So it could be incredibly harmful to the scene. And as of this moment, there is practically no. Now I said there's no tournaments in my tweet. That was a little off. There are some tournaments going on that they can participate in, but they are still like you've got to play for a month of qualifiers to potentially then get the chance to play one LAN final for 5K or something. You know, it's nothing. It's certainly not enough to motivate a lot of these teams and organizations to stick together. And that was my fear. The teams would start to disband, and we've already seen that happen, haven't we?
I hate that I can speak to this from experience. So Chak mentions that, yeah, like you said, Riot hasn't announced any tournaments and orgs don't have a reason to pick us up. This is no poaching. So this is the team that Eccles was on. I think that every single one of us is capable of competing in tier 1. I think that's pretty clear. That being said, I'd rather have people playing in a different team than quitting completely due to a lack of income. So pretty hard. Yeah, I mean, pretty hard to get picked up by a whole org. I think right now when no one can really qualify, I think like your qualification for champions is pretty questionable if you're not a part of sort of the upper echelons right now. This is a tough one because I saw this happen the year before the Overwatch League began. Europe had no tournaments for a whole year, and we're still experiencing the effects of that. As far as European player representation in the league, the numbers are extremely low. There weren't enough teams to really be there. Like European contenders was kind of there, but not really worth it for the vast majority of gamers who went on to play other things. And even now, and you know what people don't realize is that actually drastically affected the region's interest in the esport title in the future. I don't think that we really have a strong, like the Overwatch League has a strong interest from you. Now the time zone sucks for European viewers as well. But I think it really drastically impacted the interest actually from European fans because there were just no teams that they identified with. Like, hate to say it, but you know, we have a team called the London Spitfire. And they this year have got European players in them, but this is the first time that team's really been represented by Europeans ever, and it does affect you know, how invested European fans are in that team, right? Paris and London now have European teams, but it's still hard to catch the games, and yeah, there was that lack of tournaments is a big problem. I don't know. Let's think about Europe. What TOs would potentially get involved in this kind of stuff because someone has to step in and run these events. I think Riot wants to put the events on. We knew that they were sort of tendering or they were wanting teams to sort of submit tenders for events in the off season. I've spoken to Blast before. They brought up the prospect of bringing me out to do CS and Valorant events. So I think that's on their radar, but they haven't tweeted since February. They hadn't really tweeted anything sort of about it. Until recently. This is like not so long back. So makes you wonder, Mitch, maybe your concerns might be allayed at least in some part as Blast looks like they may be doing something. I mean, it's not as bad as tweeting the contract signing gif, but it's about as useless as that.
No, it's up there. It's up there for sure. Yeah, look, they got plenty of time. And I think that with the MEA playoffs coming up now, there's going to be a gap in a couple of weeks where there's nothing going on. Perfect time to get these events rolling. And I think they'll wait until, like, if you were to run an event right now, the teams that are in the EMEA are not going to play in it because they don't want to give away any of their shit for, you know, potential champion spots. But when it comes to a month from now, 2 months from now, there's going to be some of those teams that are out of the running, but that are top level. You know, you could see your G2s, your FPXs. You get a lot of high brands in there for not that much because they haven't got anything to do. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there, and it's not like Blast to miss an opportunity and smash it as well, because doing the Twitch event with them and then content for their Ignition event, it was really fucking sick. Like Blast production is a lot of fun. So I hope they do more Valorant events.
What I love about Blast is that they don't do it like everyone else. There's always a twist. It's different in some way.
We play.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we play also love jerking themselves off about their set design, and then they take credit for it whenever anyone else uses a set design that looks remotely like theirs. So, you know,
it seems like
take the good with the bad, really, don't we?
There.
Yeah. Oh fuck, man. I sit and watch and I brood and I stew and it festers. Anyway, game changes though has announced. You know what's crazy? There's more events outside of VCT that have been announced for women and underrepresented genders and identities, and there have been for sort of the rest of the Valorant scene. This is still good though. The EU is starting to try and boot up, I guess, in a big way the women's scene out there, which is awesome. It's beginning in 2021, so that's this year, by the way. It's already August, so there's a good chance that this all goes ahead, which is great news, right?
Yeah, I mean, being someone who follows NA game changers pretty closely, like getting that over to Europe is overdue in some senses, but I'm happy to see it regardless. Like that being over there, if nothing else, is nothing but fantastic. Like there's literally not a single negative that you can come up with about this. So
what about, I mean, NA situation? Do they have stuff on the horizon? Are they in a similar spot here? Because obviously we already have NSG and Knights, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about much outside of those two. Is this sufficient? First of all, obviously the Knights are announcing the Sakura Cup. So again, it's a women's tournament. As far as I understand, it's not even part of the game changers. It's something completely separate. So there's already distinct variety in sort of options for these sort of tournaments. The Summer Championships coming up for Nerd Street gamers. I thought Winter Championship was actually a very significant tournament in Valorant at the start of this year, because that's when teams like Luminosity and Immortals really started to purr along, and actually following that became a real threat when it came to sort of that when challenges kicked off there. Is NA in an okay spot, Anders, in your opinion? Obviously, as Virtuoso, like, you guys are definitely being recognized as, becoming a tier 1 team, but I'm sure these events are still relevant to you.
Yeah, so like personally, I think it's in a really good place as long as once sort of this challengers playoffs and Masters cycle sort of ends, it gets back to the circuit point style that we had for the Summer Championship. So Knights is running exclusively monthlies, and NSG had gotten to a point where they were running not only monthlies, but weeklies. And those weeklies were point qualification, $2,500 events that fed into the Summer Championship that's coming up, which, by the way, is sick. Like, not to rub salt in the wound, Mitch, but like they even sent out these sick, like, faux LAN competitive. Yeah. I just had to flex. I'm sorry.
That's fire. Damn, so I haven't had one of those in over 18 months.
Right? Like they're doing literally everything right. And it makes me incredibly bullish on the way NA's ecosystem is going to feel for the next 6 months. I assume that as soon as Summer Champs is over, they're going to go right into like a Winter Champs, have the same weekly structure with a point qualification system. Like, I'm happy to be a part of it. It is pretty damn fantastic.
So you're saying that you're not planning to go to Serbia anytime soon with the team?
No, gotcha. I mean we would be missing events if we did, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Well,
I was gonna say, I'm not sure how many teams get to claim that issue. We would miss events. Jeez.
So let me pose this question to you. I feel like I ran about this every week, so I want to get your takes on it for once, because I've burned enough bridges today already. Is this kind of because Nerd Street Game is a little bit of a different org, because I talked about, their business model's different. Is this because TOs fear or expect or suspect that Riot will just end up franchising and not really leaving them a spot at the table anyway? Do you think that's like a valid concern from a TO's perspective right now?
Limiting factor for sure.
Yeah.
Like, but put it this way: if they were 90% set on running a Valorant tournament, the fact that their long-term gain could potentially have a hard limit is going to make them at least 89% certain, maybe further down. You don't know. It depends on the business how much that's going to affect them. But I think it's definitely something hanging over a lot of a lot of justification for why are we going to run an event probably for a loss right now when there's no future gain. And that's something I don't have an answer to. I'm not a businessman. I just shout out cool shots.
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm here, because I kind of know how it works from both sides. Because I work with ESL, who are like a prime example of getting left out. I mean, they're fine. They're fucking wiping their asses with €100 bills, but They obviously, when LCS moved in house, a lot of their staff, went over to Riot. I wouldn't even say they got poached, because maybe they just wanted to they worked on the LCS, they had expertise, and so they went to Riot Games to work on the LCS. But like from ESL's perspective, they lost a lot of really, really good staff, camera operators, EGOPS people, all that stuff. A lot of them went over. Casters almost went over. Joe and Lee didn't go over for personal reasons, but they definitely had the option to become Rioters if they wanted to keep casting the LCS, which, as we now know, they didn't. And we had sort of the Deficios and the Crepos, and that was that era. So, like we said, NSG have a really good incentive to run events. And I can tell you, I heard this straight from a TO's mouth. Someone who has run big tournaments and could very well be considered as someone very suitable to run Valorant events. And they said to me, look, it's not even a problem that we have to pay a license fee to Riot to run their event. That's fine. But we're limited in some of the categories of sponsors that we can sell, because of conflicts, because that's Riot sort of mandate. And this doesn't normally happen. It's very uncommon for a developer to stipulate or restrict sponsor categories that tournament organizers can sell in, because that is literally the tournament organizer, that's the dev, Riot, not only asking for money to run the event, but also hampering the tournament organizer's ability to recoup that investment that they make in, and more, because they have to make a profit there. So I don't know. Now, my information is about 6 months old. So I don't know if that structure is outdated. I don't know how it also differs in Europe, where in the European Union, there are advertising restrictions and all sorts of other things, right? You got to understand there's an EMEA and a NA Riot esports team, and then there's a global team who sort of is the sort of head of the umbrella. And the global team makes a lot of decisions, but obviously there's a lot of regional specific calls and planning and organization that has to happen at a more local level. So there's a lot trying to navigate it. It's quite the labyrinth. But yeah, I mean, I think that, does Blast expect to run a circuit? Do they expect to run an esports league for Valorant? Fuck no. They'll do one-off tournaments, right? Like, they want to do stadium events. They don't really want to tether their business to Riot and run a Valorant championship series for 24 weeks in a row and then have an off season and do it again. That's not why these companies exist. ESL was just an example of a company that did do that stuff. Their job, that what they sold to tournament organizers without esports departments, was literally, hey, you make the game, you don't have an esports department because you don't even know it exists, but we'll be your esports department. That was their business model. So I'm just saying there is incentive for teams to run these events for Valorant. But so it's not because of worrying necessarily about franchising, but I'm sure it will limit how deep they get into bed with them, right? Mm-hmm. Let's keep going. Let's move on.
I love
a little bit about.
Sorry, I just love that. I rant about this every week, so let's get your opinions.
This is new. This was new. This was a new angle, slightly different. I was actually being fair for once, which is kind of new for me. So I'm trying it out, seeing how it feels, Mitch. I don't know. It chafes the butt crack a little bit, but that's fine.
Good.
Let's talk about how organizations. This is related. Let's talk about how organizations are paying players and whether it's sort of worth it being a tier 2 player. Here's a tweet from, it's a thread actually from Isolate, who played on this ill-fated Equinox team, right? The one that afterwards tried to make people pay to fucking try out. Like, just the absolute papegory of this is legendary. It's crazy how free agent organizations with no financial backing put a fuck ton of resources and work into trying to help their teams. But I spent 5 months on an org with full funding, paid staff in a facility, and it was the worst org experience I've had. This is obviously, him talking about Equinox. They had to push back to get tournament entries covered. It looks like they never interacted with the owner. And this guy's basically saying he's been on a free agent team who doesn't. So I guess there's like a manager, right? And they've done more than Equinox. That's kind of insane, right? It seems like there's a real spectrum of how effective a lot of these orgs are in terms of fostering their talent.
I guess it's like anything though. Like back when I was working in restaurants, you would have a manager who's like, don't touch the fucking the chips, or the best thing we had. We're working on like making the sundaes and the Oreo milkshakes and stuff like that. And obviously, it's hard to measure, Uber. It's hard to get the exact right amount of ice cream, the exact right amount of Oreos. Sometimes you make too much. Someone ordered a small, you made a large. Oops, someone has to drink it. And those sort of things you can write off. You can be very generous to your staff and you can make them happy and kind of fat by giving them unlimited Oreo milkshake. But some people, then you work for them, and if you're caught standing looking at a wall for more than 3 seconds, you're getting shouted at. You're being kicked out. So I think that it's the same with orgs, where some of them are fantastic with limited resources. They'll give you 100% of what they can. They'll just try to look after you as a player and understand that you are their primary product. You're the thing that makes their org actually matter. And others will just look at you as a spoiled piece of shit and give you nothing and want you to succeed as if you had everything still. So just ignorance, I suppose, and not understanding how some of these things work, along with a little sprinkle of greed in there, and you end up with, from what I gather, Equinox.
God.
Yeah, I mean,
Sanders.
This is like such a classic issue for me, because I mean, I've worked in collegiate esports for the last 2.5 years, and there's always going to be that conversation of, are you better off playing for an amateur team or are you better off playing for a college? And it's horror stories like this that have made me answer college a larger percent of the time than a lot of people would probably expect, because there's no other way to call it. The incompetence that exists in a lot of tier 2 and even tier 1 esports organizations is baffling. I mean, I come from like a true business background. I worked for a private equity firm for a couple of years. I've held positions all the way up to director of business optimization. Like, I know how to run a business. Looking at the inside guts of some of these esports orgs causes me visceral pain. Like, I actually recoil. It is terrifying how some of these places run themselves. And so to see things like this come through, it breaks my heart. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, we all know that this exists, and you sort of have to have a bullshit-o-meter to be able to call this out from the get-go. I mean, running Virtuoso, we're obviously looking for orgs right now, and like, I've put together a full pitch deck for us. I take meetings and I'm very upfront with people. I'm like, we're a process team. We care about as much or more about infrastructure as we do about player contracts. If you can't offer us X, Y, and Z, then you're not an org and we don't want to work with you. Like, plain and simple. So, I mean, it's an interesting process, to say the least.
I've seen all parts of the spectrum, right? Like, we have to admit that there are some organizations that are doing it right and that have been doing it right for ages, right? Some organizations that are actually a business and run their affairs, accordingly. Say what you like about 100 Thieves, especially in terms of who they choose to be the coach of their team. But now this is a team that are, now looking into moving or just, sending their roster over to Texas to boot camp. It's not quite Serbia, guys, but they've complained about being on the West Coast, which is not a common complaint compared to the rest of the country, but being there has really affected how, like, their ping issues they face in games. So they are heading over to Texas to boot camp. And Tens actually spoke about this. Like, why go to Texas? What's the benefit? What's the point? Tens actually speaks to this in a clip on his stream, so you can watch that here. It'll inform the conversation.
About 100T playing from Texas. They qualified. 100% they qualified. There's no way they don't qualify. Trust me, the ping goes crazy. Like, actual crazy. I knew already prior to playing on it that it was insane. When I actually went to Texas, it was even more insane than I thought. Like, I'm not joking. It was even more insane than what I expected online. Isn't basically every team is going to Texas? What team isn't going to Texas? I know. Isn't TSM also going to Texas? I'm pretty sure they are. That's what I thought I heard. Or I saw on Reddit or something like that. But if TSM are going to Texas, 100 Thieves are in Texas, Xset is already in Texas, my team's in Texas. Who else? Who else am I missing? There's one more team from Texas.
I can definitely confirm that moving to Austin has been something that a lot of people have been talking about. My partner won't do it because she thinks all Texans are racist, so that's a shame. But I do know plenty of people who are out there now, and it's I mean, DDK recently announced, I think, or at least his partner, sorry, did that they were moving out there. So, I mean, talking about the ping, obviously, is there a Texas server or it's an Illinois server, right?
It's a Texas server. This is the pain that I go through constantly with a team that has 4 Canadian players on it. The 2 central servers in this region are Illinois and Texas. Yep. If you live in the Northeast, there are routing issues to Texas that make it borderline unplayable. We're talking packet loss on a frequent basis that bounces you to north of 100 ping. A lot of these players aren't Northeast, they're like Northwest, so they're not necessarily dealing with extreme packet loss, but they're dealing with 50, 60, sometimes 70 ping, and then you go down to Texas and you get 12, or you get 8. And so, I mean, in a game, people like to talk shit about complaining about ping and whatnot. If you're talking about a difference of 50 or 60 to sub 10, that is a substantial advantage. Like a tangible, significant advantage. There is no denying it whatsoever. So
yeah, on 8 ping, just pooing on people.
Yeah, like you literally won't have time to respond with that sort of ping differential. We're talking about a pro ecosystem where 20 milliseconds is the difference.
Let me ask you then. Like, I've never heard it. I've never asked a North American competitor what they think of it. What's the acceptable band between you and your opponents in either direction? 10, 20, 30?
Acceptable?
Yeah. Like, where's the line of, nah, fuck that, we got to find a solution?
Plus or minus 20. Anything beyond that is like genuinely not acceptable.
Okay. So that's 0.002 seconds. Wait, let me move the 0.02, right? Seconds. Yeah, in terms of ping. Yeah. I mean, and there's so many people like, man, your eye can't see more than 60 hertz. Why are you getting a 240 hertz monitor? I mean, trust me, they can. And at the pro level, I think you can see how this makes a difference. Mitch, is this an issue at all in Europe?
No, not really. Playing against CIS teams, Turkish teams, definitely. When you're scrimming, you feel it. Fucking hell. I really hope that it's the ping that Defo feels that good, because he's, got 120 ping, because if it's not that, I'm fucking scared. But it's not so much an issue here. Like, most teams are going to be maybe 30, 40, but the players are going to be mixed up in between them. 2 of your guys might have 50 ping, the other 2 might have 10. It depends which team you're looking at and which team you're playing against. For the most part, though, it's fine. Put it this way, CNET fucking succeeds, doesn't he? He manages to do it on Frankfurt servers, so okay, anyone can survive on EU ping. That's why I say asking a North American more so, because I think, like, for us, we only really complain because the point would be that normally if you have an issue, at least one of the other players on the enemy team also has an issue. So it's like you're all motivated to solve that problem. Whereas in America, you could have obviously a full team that's on 10 and a full team that's on 60, and the 10 team is like, we're good to play. Let's go. Why not? So yeah, that's why I was interested in an NA perspective on it, because in EU, it's not that it's different. Obviously, ping is the same. If you've got plus 50 ping, you've got plus 50 ping. Doesn't matter where you are, but it's not something that's thought about quite as much, and certainly not talked about as much as it is over in America.
So can we circle back then? And as you were talking about sort of the kind of offers that you field from orgs and sort of what you expect, if you're a tier 2 or even tier 1 player, can we talk about a couple things you want to look for in a good org, like an actual org with infrastructure and not just like a salary or contract under your nose? Like, what are you looking for?
Well, there's the obvious one. You want a contract as a player, and there are certain things around that salary that should be common sense for a lot of these up and coming tier 2 guys, but it isn't. If there isn't some form of guaranteed severance in your contract, you shouldn't be signing it. I will die on that hill. If you're like one of these 18, 19-year-old guys who's potentially putting off school, taking a gap year, doing this, that, or the other thing in order to play the game, and you're not guaranteed some form of compensation, then you should not be signing that paper. I don't care how good you think it is. So some sort of guaranteed severance, some sort of insulation from you just being dropped in 3 weeks and left out to dry. to the point that we've been making a couple different places at this point access to things like boot camps for significant events, especially as you get up into those tier 1 organizations. If they're not expecting to send you for boot camps, then they're not serious about the game that you're playing. Like, plain and simple. You should have support staff, a coach, ideally an assistant coach or strategic coach, 1 or 2 analysts, like a fully built out staff, access to a performance psychologist, access to a performance coach and or nutritionist, player visas. Holy moly. I mean, again, I have 4 Canadians on my team. Player visas should be so high on the priority list. It is insane. The number of tier 2 organizations that don't even understand they'll be in breach of the law because they don't know how visas work. It's one of those things where, like I said, you look at some of these orgs and you actually freak out a little bit because they're actively breaking the law with the way that they manage their rosters and allow them to
But TOs have done that as well.
It's like,
honestly, you know how many
it blows my
TOs
mind.
used to have us work their events on Estes? Like they'd have us work their fucking events on Estes, and we just get paid backdoor through like a European.
That still
org.
happens. The
Still happens, by
vast
the way.
majority of CS events. No, well, I can't say all because I don't know about faces and stuff like that. I've never worked with them, but I know that the vast majority of CS events going up to like 200, 300, 400k prize pools are just make your way here, and that's all it is. There's no work visa. They'll tell you to say you're on vacation and just chill out. And I know that some people, like, you'll see sometimes there's missing talent for certain events. Maybe they're on the announcement. A buddy of mine, he was supposed to go to America. It was the fucking weirdest thing ever. Apparently the guy who was at border control knew who he was, saw the announcement for the event. And he was like, "You're going to work, buddy, aren't you?" So he was fucked. And so he missed the event, missed the 200k event because they wouldn't sort out visas. Because
this is
wild.
Going to happen more and more. Like if the industry continues to grow this way, this will happen more and more. I had to have a visa in China because they just won't let you in. You can't. There's no like vacation visa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really complicated stuff. The only reason I get to do European events is because I had like I had a work permit card from Germany. That was why I was allowed to do it. But it's very, very complicated. And yeah, you can get in a lot of trouble. Right now, people don't know who the fuck you are. You can say, like, for example, if you're traveling to Gamescom, people would just say they were going to like a convention, right? It's more of a business trip, networking, B2B, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you can, it's foggy. But in NA, like it's a legitimate thing because of, how, well, I mean, look at Decop, right? Look at how Mexico works. He can't even compete in some events, as we've recently learned. And all the Canadian talent that we have, having to getting them to the US for boot camps and even that kind of stuff. Like, I guess, and then you're a Canadian, if you're employed by a US company, there's tax implications and other stuff like that. It's a fuckfest, really. But this is stuff you need to be up to speed on if you want to operate in this industry in the future. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of money. All right, we're going to come back after the break, ladies and gentlemen, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the roster moves that have been going on. And then I'm going to use these two's brains to help me make some bloody predictions on what we should see at our Challengers playoffs. So don't go too far. The back half of Valoranting is up after the break. Welcome back to Valoranting, ladies and gentlemen. We've spent a little bit of time in the previous segment talking about maybe what you're looking out for if you're a tier 1 or even, a tier 2 player and you want to make sure you're signed to a reputable org. There are a lot of stories in the industry that are cautionary tales for this kind of stuff. So do your homework or get someone like Anders to run your team, I guess. Let's talk some roster moves here because this was an announcement that came from FPX, very highly respected org in EMEA. And they published, obviously, FPX is a Chinese organization, I believe, at its core. They are recruiting Chinese players for a Valorant roster. They've got to be 16, Radiant, and they need to have experience in the games. But I mean, Mitch, talk me through this because can't FPX only have one team compete in VCT?
First of all, thank you very much for the graphic. As we can see, they say here that you must be 16. You must be Radiant.
I see a 16.
And whatever the fuck the other thing was. As far as I understand, they cannot participate in the same tournament. We've discussed this about North America before. You cannot have, your TSMs facing off against each other. when it comes later down the line, which means if you're picked up as a B team, which I'm presuming this one would be, you're not going to be competing in the same leagues. Now,
Well,
I don't know, like, if you
there
are
is no China region as far as we know for Valorant, right?
that's what
Exactly,
I'm kind of angling at, is like, when you're within China, FPX is going to be one of those brands that it knows everything that's going on, because they will have friends that are working in those TOs. The TOs will probably just come to them outright and be like, by the way, you know, we want you involved in this. Are you interested? So them signing them
Can you even
means there's
play the
probably
game in
something.
China?
You couldn't. You used to have to VPN. I'm not sure if that's changed.
You have to VPN still.
Oh, so it would be very weird. It is very weird then. But it possibly implies there's something going on. Some rumbles in the Chinese region that there could potentially be a local tournament, their own version of VCT. Like, for FPX to pick up a Chinese roster either means that it's going to be a separate entity, a separate VCT style tournament.
There's no way
whatever.
it's a women's team.
I think they would have specified that then. So you're looking at that as a potential. But the other side of it is that for FPX, maybe if the Chinese region was getting an actual VCT, would they prioritize having a Chinese team over having a European? Like, would they actually drop their EMEA roster to pursue it? Because
Possibly.
majority of their following is Chinese. It would suit them a lot more, I would think, if you could have, you know, the exact same guys and you just got to choose their nationality. It would be Chinese, right? So I don't know if that's
They have
a
to be Hong
negative thing for
Kongers
EU.
to play the game, I think, or that's what the game is released. I don't think that you have to be careful. Like, you can't endorse using a VPN in China to get through the Great Firewall. Like, that's not. I mean, you're gonna have someone
Great
knocking on your
Firewall, I
door,
like
drag
that.
you out.
I like
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I assume it's that the Chinese consider Hong Kong to be mainland China. So maybe this is actually just for Hong Kong folk. And it sounds like, because the game's literally not released. And I don't know. It's whack. But that does imply that there are, like, I like your approach there. It does imply that there are plans for the game to be released in China potentially, or for it to receive regional support from Riot, who we know already operate. Sorry, someone in chat's telling us we forgot these random announcements. We haven't even got to the roster moves yet, but okay, cool. Yeah, so interesting scenario there. Let's get on to the actual roster moves now. Let's talk about Heretics. They benched Ardiis. They benched him. He went away for health reasons, quote unquote, and he's now on the bench and he's looking for other options. Quite the fall from grace.
You know, the thing about Ardiis is, in the games that he played for Heretics, he didn't play poorly at all. I don't think that this is a performance-based change. I think this, again, just falls under the question of what the fuck are Heretics planning. And I think that when you look at that roster, I've said this a million times, they did not win when it comes to exchanging their players. G2 got the better deal. They gave Ardiis and Patatek over to these guys. And I really feel like they had a clear understanding of either one or two players that they wanted to pick up. And that meant that Ardiis has to go for them to fulfill what they want. It also means that they currently have two players on their bench, right? Because as far as I understand, Niso is still there. So this is now a 7-man roster, soon to be 8, presumably, which is strange.
Yeah. Strange is like the understatement of the century. I have no idea what's going on with them. I mean, I'm sure that there are plenty of people who would argue that this is performance based. I mean, if you look at Ardiis during their most recent run, it was not his best. But at the same time, like, you don't bench a player off of a single string of events or single event for that matter. And
sure,
it seems like they're a little bit lost in the sauce. I think that they're doing this almost in preemption of a lot of the sort of off-season roster juggling. And yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what they do. Tons of teams are going to be doing weird things that don't seem to make a lot of sense. And I think trying to make sense of them.
I mean, that's how we're going to run this damn show in the off season.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
Fuck it up. Let it burn. That's fine.
I was like, I was listening to you fuckers whenever there were changes made at Alliance, and you're like, oh, maybe it's this. And I'm sitting there like, no, it's fucking
And you're
not.
just laughing. Yeah.
Yeah, like, but he was so good statistically. And I'm like, you okay? Yeah, there's no way to know. There's no way to know unless you're in there. And I think looking purely at the stats, I didn't think Ardiis underperformed. I think he did his job, especially as a Sova. I would be surprised if that was the reason that they took him out. I think this is just a wider scope. It's like when you had you had Meadow removed from FPX, it's not because he's a shit player. It's not because he's bad at what he does. It's because what he does isn't necessarily what they want. They want maybe a more aggressive player, maybe whatever it is. But Ardiis is out of here to make room for someone that I presume is going to be announced very soon. Although again, that kind of falls into, is it actually maybe the injury was, not actually a thing. Maybe he didn't like the team. There's so many possibilities out there. We could write a book about why Ardiis maybe got benched.
Yes, I mean, again, if you're not in there, you don't know what it's like, especially a personality like his. Like you never know. He could just be like really chill in a team environment and talk mad shit on social, or it could be the same, right? It could be a lot of crossover. This is an interesting one. Vitality. I really thought Vitality were looking very, very, very good coming into the sort of EMEA playoffs, but they cut Lowkii. Vitality now, if I'm not mistaken, they don't qualify. They fall short in a way that we maybe don't expect them to, in fairness. Only a few teams can sort of go to Challengers playoffs. They will not be one of them. What are your thoughts on this? Because, I think at times, you could also say that, like statistically, like Sender didn't look great in some maps and then look incredible. So what are your kind of thoughts? Is this the right player for Vitality to be dropping here, do you think, if any?
I don't want to say I have an issue with Lowkii at all. I had an issue with him playing Jet a lot of the time. That really fucking confused me in the last couple of games that we saw them playing, because as we discussed last week, it's not an issue that Lowkii cannot play Jet. It's not that he played him so horrifically that I never want to see him on that agent again. It's looking at the Vitality roster with Brams, Vax, Sender. Is Lowkii the one that you want to be playing Jet? Fuck no is the answer. He's in fact the last person on that roster I would see, maybe second last, picking up a Jet. So it was weird. I don't know why that was happening. Maybe that was a last-ditch attempt for him to show that he has something else, his opportunity. Maybe he was like, oh, on Sova, I'm not that good, but put me on Jet and I can be huge. But it didn't work out, that's for sure. I think him being removed is maybe a bit of an overstep. But again, I guess they've got someone in mind, because on a Jet, weird. On a Sova, absolutely no issue with Lowkii. I think he's a decent player. So I'm interested to see. Maybe they like Ardiis as a Sova. Who knows?
Is Jesmond still benched on this team? Because they had Shalaby playing, right?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Between BDS having a 16-man roster and Vitality swapping around players left, right, and center, now dropping Lowkii. It's a roster shuffle, but it doesn't really look like it. It looks like someone's dropped the deck and kind of picked up the wrong cards, or picked up random cards and they're rolling with it. But Shalakby, I'm a big fan of. I really hope he sticks around. And again, when it came to Shalakby being on the lineup, you're kind of thinking, oh, he's going to be, pulling out his rays, maybe a bit of Jet, and Loki's jetting. Why is that a thing? So yeah, I don't know what the fuck's going on with that roster.
I mean, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's probably even bigger changes. I know, Shalakvi was rumored to be playing with Anubis again. For whatever reason, I don't know. So we'll see what more updates or what changes come out of that Vitality team. Who have, let's be honest, they have all the fucking time in the world to do whatever they want with this roster, to find a way to make it work, because as we know, there's not a lot on the horizon in Europe for teams like this, and those prospects definitely limits the incentive for Vitality to continue having these guys on the team. So and also incentivizes them to make more drastic changes, because they feel like they have more time to allow players to acclimate to new conditions here. So let's go over the pond and talk about NA, because obviously the biggest news in NA this week is probably the Envy news, right? Obviously we know that Ye departed Andbox. JC Stunny had also just left that team as well, so that who knows what the fuck's going on there. George Getty sort of hints that there is a bidding war going on for that player. I think as of late, Ye has really been dominating. Sabrosa talked him up on a clip we showed on the show recently. He's like an 8 ping demon, I think is how he was referred to. And we eventually found out that this team, we saw that Ye went over to Envy, but I want to talk a bit more about this Andbox team first, because this is what their roster looks like right now. So this is Alexander and Kanpeki on this team, and also, I'm not sure if Cooper was someone I should know, but we know Alexander was on EG, right? And Kanpeki also was starting to get a little bit of notoriety himself. Anders, I'd love to know what your take is on this transition for Andbox.
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting lineup. So the people that they have playing, sort of going through that list and pulling out the ones that were actually playing for them because they were in this recent last chance qualifier for the NSG Summer Champs. They were running Mata, Vice, Kempeki, Alexander, and Cooper. So Mata and Vice obviously been with the team for a bit, still staples of it. Kempeki coming in from EZ5, phenomenal player. Alexander, who was really a shining star that I mean, I don't want to say he's been stuck on EG because they've gotten some decent results, but based off of his early performances, I mean, we pull up his numbers, like look at those stats and tell me he's not insane. His early results and then him going to EG always confused me. I thought he was going to be aiming a bit higher, so to see him now pivoting onto a roster that seemingly has greater aspirations makes a lot of sense. And then Cooper, I'm not a big CS guy, but evidently Cooper's a CS transfer, and
he's Freakazoid's brother.
Yeah, I did a bit of research. He's played one official ever in Valorant, and it was on Swole Patrol with like Zelsis and like a bunch of guys way back in the day. Their opponent was Code 7, and Code 7 hasn't been a team for like 10 months. So he's coming in. I don't know how much he's played. I don't know where their sort of assurances are that he's going to play well in Valorant in general, but I mean, he's the X factor of this team. It'll be interesting to see how it all hashes out.
I'm about it. Alexander's a pretty filthy player. I think he was one of the best on EG, which was why I was so shocking that he got dropped. I think a lot of people were like, hey, excuse me, why the fuck is he off this team? All right, let's talk about the Envy news, right? So Envy obviously making some real money moves lately, right? They bring on Marved. We see, an improvement. We talked with Mike's as well about, how they're sort of acclimating Marved, and then Ye joins. There was this bidding war, I guess, was won out by Hastro's hip pocket. And El Diablo is now on the Envious squad. What does this mean? For someone who obviously is a little bit more entrenched in the scene, has seen more of Ye play, how big an upgrade is this for Envy, who are knocking at the door of top 2 teams in NA easily?
It is substantial. Like George mentioned that there was a bidding war for him. It was warranted. Like he was a hot prospect, and him joining an already sort of escalating Envy team, like, it's too early to say it, but if there was ever going to be a Sentinel Slayer in NA, this is probably it.
Okay. That's the take I was looking for. No doubt about it. There were a bunch of tweets as well, people just like memeing about, well, not even necessarily memeing, but I think it's like the TSM guys tweeting how like Envy would now be the top team in NA, and like congratulations on qualifying for Berlin. Like they were doing it in advance just based on the scrim results there. But it looks like the expectations for this team is high, but obviously this is at the cost and as of money departing from this team. Yeah. What do you think about this situation? What are his prospects going forward? And, is he the right person to sort of, have to fall on the sword here?
So I know that Mame, at least distantly in the past, was IGLing for them. I don't know how much that's held true as of recent, and with them bringing in Marv, who famously IGL'd incredibly well for FaZe, it seems like there's a little bit of overlap there. I don't know in terms of team dynamic how well they mesh together, how well sort of the calling and counter calling round to round worked for their team, but where they brought in an IGL, they have someone who historically had IGL'd for them and wasn't necessarily a standout player in any other metric. Like, it makes sense. You brought in someone that fills the roles that you need, and now you're going for just raw, absurd firepower to flesh out the rest of your roster. Like, it all checks out intuitively.
I mean, I don't think anyone ever considered Mummy as like a tier 1 crackhead jet operator player, right? The guy's playing Astra operator. He's, it almost felt like it was, they were just trying to make something work, you know what I mean? And they didn't really have sort of the schmeeg element necessarily at the operator. So we'll see what this team can provide now. Envy definitely looks like it's a firepower upgrade. And if you want to tangle with teams that feature like players like Wardell and Tens, then yeah, maybe that's the direction you need to be going in. Envy have always looked strategically very good. Retakes were always impressive from them, very meticulous the way that they played out. But when it came to just raw talent, maybe that was something that they weren't bringing in spades. And the addition of Marvin and now Ye might give them that little leg up. we were supposed to have him on the show today, but unfortunately he couldn't make it, which is totally fine. But we've had him on here before and had a great interview with Vanity. He recently moved on from version 1. This is a team that was kind of, has always had to have a stand-in in some way or another, right? They had to have a stand-in in Iceland, and then Zelsus got suspended for a time. They had to play with a stand-in for him. So, a little bit tough that V1 haven't really been able to get their ducks in a row properly. And Vanity's moving on. Now, Anders, does this indicate to you that he's definitely moving on for like a big top big time team, do you think? Is that the direction he as a player is going in terms of how his stock is looking?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So I think if I was in his shoes, this would be sort of my thought process. He is one of the best IGLs in the region. I think disproportionately so in terms of the teammates that are around him. Like where he stacks up against other NA region IGLs and how his teammates stack up against other NA players in their respective roles. He is a clear notch or two above anyone else on that roster. I think he is looking to find his way onto a team that is more of his caliber, where he can pursue the things that he wants to pursue.
Mm-hmm. Guy seemed really level-headed, had a great understanding of the game, and obviously had already found some degree of success in Counter-Strike. So there are rumors about where he's going, right? We know that he was sort of exploring his options. This is George Geddes again. Shout out to the homie. Mentioned like he might be going to Cloud9, and Odorous might be replacing him on this V1 team, which is nice. I mean, Odorous obviously, went down with the ship on Dignitas, but is still able to be, a key factor in sort of the tier 2 and sort of lower tier 1 scene. So, yeah, okay. Cloud9 is set to sign him, and the organization's going to field it. Fuck me, a 6-man roster. Here we go again, boys. Strap yourselves in.
Well, this won't work out.
Fuck me. It's just because they're taking time, like they can't release their players instantly. Like, why? All right. So let's do this. Who does Vanity replace on his Cloud9 roster then in the long term, assuming they go with a 6-man look for a while? Because he's playing Smoker, yeah?
It's got to be Mitch, yeah?
Yeah.
Surely. I can't think of anyone else that would make much of any sense.
Is Mitch calling on this team right now, this C9 team?
I think so.
Okay. So maybe they are looking to replace Smoker, Shot Caller. That is a big overhaul for this team who had what? Floppy came back in? Or wait, no, he went back out. Zeppa came in. What the fuck's going on with this team, bro? I have whiplash trying to follow Cloud9 Blue's roster status.
Who knows at this point? Like they've reworked their roster like 5 times in the last 6 months, and this most recent iteration has actually been noticeably on the uptick. So it's a little bit curious that they're like, yes, what we need to do is quickly change this. But evidently that's the game plan. And all things considered, if they were going to change it up, this is one that seems fairly reasonable. So, I mean, we'll just have to see how it goes.
Is it even remotely possible that Zeta has some sort of whether it's a visa issue, whether it's back in the day what Mixwell had, where he just wanted to go back to Spain? I mean, in Counter-Strike, he had so many opportunities to play on decent top-level European teams, and he said, fuck it, no, I want to go back and play with a bunch of Spaniards. And he was just homesick, right? Is that possible? Because, I mean, Vanity, he's played everything. Like, the dude can play every agent, whether it's in matchmaking or in officials. I actually think he's played every single agent in the game in officials at some point or another, or very close to. So it maybe Zeta's going home as a possible alternative. But yeah, it's certainly curious. I really don't like the 6-man roster stuff.
This is actually a 7-man roster because Floppy is still technically on this team, but I think he's gone back to CS. We just haven't heard any news about what he's doing, but I think he just realized he went the Arns sort of route, decided kind of wasn't for him. At least, so Cloud9, because of not having any huge accolades in other tournaments, have been able to compete in the NSG Summer Championship, so they have qualified for that. They left it until the last chance qualifier to do it, and they just pooped on all the teams. It was kind of not fair. So, they made that. So we'll see what comes from Cloud9. They at least have a chance to get reps in these this summer championship, right? And up against like some presumably decent teams. So we will get a chance to see if Vanity goes to this team. It's still a fucking rumor at this point, but I mean, again, Georgia's strike rate is quite good. No real reason to doubt it at the moment. We'll see what C9 Blue looks like. Feels like a good move for them. They're still looking for the perfect look. They really badly want to be in the conversation for top team in NA, so hopefully they get some there. Let's talk about NA. Out of all of the people on this show, probably the only person whose predictions will really mean anything is Anders. But that's fine. We want to talk a little bit about NA here, and let's show the regional finals bracket. So challenges finals for NA. Remember, they send 3 teams, 3 delegates will move on from this bracket. This is it. Let's talk about it here, Anders, because I'm wondering if in your mind you have any sort of, idea of who they would be right now.
So, I mean, it's the most tame take you can really kind of muster, which is Sentinels, Envy, and 100 Thieves probably being the ones who make it through. I think that TSM is going to make a really good case for themselves, though, and I think the fact that Envy and Sentinels have to meet up with each other so quickly in the upper bracket is going to play spoiler to a lot of what would otherwise be long-legged lower bracket runs.
Sure. I mean, the way I see this playing out is, Sentinels. Okay, so who? All right, let's do it like this then. Who wins the Team Envy and TSM?
Envy and TSM? Envy, for sure.
Who?
Although,
okay.
I say that like confidently, but there is a corner case probability that team just face plants.
Oh man, it's a big call, right? I mean, how much better did Envy look with Marved on this roster?
Significantly. I think Marved was one of the best roster moves of the last year.
Oh man. Envy, I mean, this is them playing, I think, through challenges. I mean, the game against Gen G was pretty convincing stuff. So we basically have to talk through the 3 teams that will make it. So TSM potentially get put in the lower bracket here. This TSM team, that would put them up against like Luminosity, or put them up against
they
like
go Rise. Like, so I mean, I just have my pick 'em off to the side.
Yeah.
It's Envy beats TSM, Sentinels beat Rise, and so you get TSM Rise lower bracket. TSM wins that. They're probably facing against XSET in their next, and then they have to play up against Envy again.
Wait, it doesn't flip? So
I thought it would flip into the lower bracket.
Unless the pick'em is muddled, then
that's very strange. If it doesn't, maybe it doesn't, but that's just not the normal system for tournaments. But fair enough.
Yeah. LBJ, I know what you're asking for, but we as hosts can't do the pick'em, right? This screenshot is not coming from our PCs, mate. It's coming from a production one. So I know what you're asking for, but it's not really technically something we can do. Okay, I think it's the upper bracket round 2 that flips. So that flips into the lower bracket games. That's maybe the reason for concern. So can we talk about Luminosity here, Anders, because they also I think Anders' Twitter name is spelled incorrectly under his portrait. It says Andres, but let's talk about LG, because we just recently found out that Barn got benched from this team and Moose is coming back in effective immediately. Mm-hmm. What do you think this team's prospects are, based on the teams that they're sharing that part of the bracket with?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to look great for them. I think that XSET has sort of been faltering lately, but I still think that they are favored versus LG. And even if LG somehow makes it through, the likelihood that they get past a 100 Thieves or a FaZe is functionally non-existent in my eyes.
Yep.
So, like, they're going to have a rough go of it, roster change or not. I think that they probably came to that conclusion prior to this, and bringing in Moose is almost an attempt at, like, igniting a honeymoon phase where they somehow just, like, scamaz their way through a couple of games that they otherwise wouldn't be able to pick up.
Sure. Yeah, obviously, Zodi, yes, we know it's official, but, we didn't exactly rush to include the things you wanted us to include on the show, Zodi, because you literally wanted us to look at an article that read the word Amogus over and over again. So maybe click on the articles if you want to see this. And the tempo is not picking up X Noble. All right, just sort yourself out here. Okay, so we don't have a thing to fill in for Preds here because I think that, you know, it's a little complicated. But and you have to give me 3 teams that go through. You can choose 2 or you don't have to. Tell me how they make it through. But I need your 3 teams that are going to make it through here to Berlin.
Sentinels envy 100 Thieves. I got to. I'm sorry, TSM. You're doing great. You're on the upswing, but I still don't think you can take down those 3.
So you said Sentinels envy 100 Thieves, yeah?
Yeah.
I feel that. I feel like those teams are going to be looking good. Mitch, did you have any thoughts here? Like, is there any teams that you really want to see come through?
As always, I've every time we've talked about NA, I've gone with my boys Pure and BCJ. I'm still gonna. I'm gonna say I agree Sentinels. I agree 100 Thieves, but fuck it, Xset. Let's go, baby. Cool. They're making it all the way.
I always make the edgy, like I'm a Ravenclaw. I think I'm a Ravenclaw. I always pick Xset in these brackets because they're kind of fucking cracked, man. With Zekin on this team, like, it's kind of filthy, dude. I mean, I can see them beating like a 100T in that upper final, and they would just qualify from there, right?
Yeah.
And they just fucking hell. So you really only have to win 2 games to make it through. Oh my gosh, this guy's a freaking nutbag. This team looks sick. Def on this team as well. Let's not forget. I don't know, man. I'm about it. I'm about this. The Xset call faux show. While we are regaled by some of Xset's moments here against, and that was a 6 series against Sentinels, man. It sucks because, let's be honest, we won't get a serious Sentinels versus Xset matchup in this fucking tournament because it's for seeding. But again, can you imagine, like, at the end of this bracket, if one of these teams has to go through the lower bracket, like, they're going to be so boomed. Again, it's one of those tournaments here where grand finals don't really matter, chat. That's how it be. But let's move on. Let's talk about EMEA. Because now, again, I'm sure Anderson can probably weigh in on this, but especially Mitch as well. I'm sure you've had a ton of thoughts about what you think is going to go on here. First of all, let's talk about the stream schedule. So everyone knows you want to watch EMEA. Here's how to do it. So the schedule is available. I think it's on the website here. It's running from, the 12th through the 22nd. So that is coming up real soon. A couple days, it's all going to kick off. EMEA is sick. It's so interesting, especially for me, who I watch EU. I don't watch CIS and I don't watch Turkey. I don't get to see those games. I don't have the time. So really looking forward to seeing those teams turn up here. There's like the circuit points are kind of complicated, obviously. There's circuit points on the line, and you can see 1st through 4th, you automatically qualify for Masters 3. I assume that do you get any points as well as that? You have to, right?
You'll automatically get points for your placement in Masters 3. So it's if you go out last. I think they just don't want to say like, oh, 4th is going to get 60 points, but maybe they actually get 80 or something like that. So yeah, your points will be allocated when you get to M3.
Okay. That makes sense here. This is obviously so even though this is Challengers Finals and you're not in Masters, there is a chance to get circuit points here, even if you don't get top 4 and qualify. So, that's still important. There's still an incentive to put work in here. And it's actually now that also can answer the problem of like games for seeding, forehead, and all that sort of stuff. So worth these teams putting in the effort. Mitch, let's have a look at the bracket now. And I want you to sort of talk me through it here because I think this is something that Yinsu kind of mentioned. She felt that like I think she wished that it was FPX versus Navi or something like that. But anyway, tell me what you think about this just on face of it. Is there a weaker side of the bracket?
I think so. I think the bottom side is a little bit weaker. FPX's run in particular, the fact that they have to face Fireflux and then move on to Supermassive Blaze, like theoretically, those are easier matches than Ascend, than G2, perhaps than Gambit, because as I always say, fucking Defo, man, that guy is just sick. So yeah, like it's weird, but I don't really take a personal gripe with seedings. Like, this OG's been here since beta. I remember the days where I've had to had a couple of calls with some of the independent TOs back in the Ignition events because they would send us the seeding and they will have just done it off the VLR ranking and they will have like a roster who's like changed 4 players and they're seeding them second or something. And you're just like, dude, no, we can't do this. So nowadays I'm like, oh, who gives a fuck? It's not that bad. It might be a slightly harder game, but especially because there's double elimination, I don't really respect crying about the seeding. It's been a small remark that maybe it could have been slightly better. But again, when merging, it's the same as with Masters, right? When you're merging all these different regions, there's no real way to tell how they compare. Like to me, Gambit, last time around should have easily made it through and they didn't. And some of these
Yep.
things that I guess like the seeding won't matter because who knows, maybe Fireflux are going to be the best team we've ever seen, and then everyone will talk about it and go, "Oh, FPX got fucked by that format. They should have had better seeding." So that's whatever.
I wanted to see FPX versus Ascend, but Anders, what do you think about this bracket? I think it's pretty clear, right? I mean, Vodafone Giants and Fun Plus Fitness look obviously decent, but G2 Giants is an interesting game, I guess. FPX might be cruising through. Anything that stands out to you about this bracket?
I mean, the one thing that stands out because I just don't have a read on them, and that's Na'Vi. I literally have no idea how good or bad they are. And so my ability to gauge what upsets they could cause, how deep they're going to run, I have zero confidence in that. Everything else seems fairly straightforward. Like I know the 4 teams I would expect to go through. Whether or not that happens relies on a couple of teams that have had like fairy tale runs in the recent past keeping those going. So
I'll tell you that the Navi roster, they definitely have upset potential against Liquid, against any team in here. Like they're really, really solid. In particular, I am a massive fan of SSK, have been since day one, seeing him on the Party Pirates roster. So I'm really excited to see him hopefully back on a little bit of a breach or some support elements, very viable in the meta. These guys could definitely surprise us, not just with results, but how they play as well. I'm very excited to see them. It's shit that one of those teams has to come up against Ascend afterwards because that's gonna be pretty tough. But the idea that we get an Ascend versus Gambit, holy shit! Defo and CNET on the same server. I don't want to watch that. I don't know if I'm casting that game. I fucking hope not, for my throat's sake. That's gonna be incredible if it ends up happening. Of course, they would both have to win their first games.
What do you guys think about Guild right now? Where are they positioned in terms of the overall field here?
$1 million question, isn't it? It's within the European region, it's so hard, man. Like I go through phases where I look at Guild and I'm like, man, some of the stuff they do is just fucking dumb. They're gonna get smashed. And then some days I'm like, oh, this is the best team I've ever seen. They're in the top 5, most definitely within Europe. Okay. They have cemented themselves in place, and I really can't put my finger on the pulse of what actually makes them as good as they are. There's so many different factors to this team. Their adaptation on second to second, round to round, but also the ability to have Yassine now a much more tenured player than he was before. He has so much more depth. And I don't just mean that in terms of what he does, but how he paces himself in rounds. He can control his aggression, which is one of the main criticisms I would have had of him in the early days of. That was such a sick little spray from Magnum, my god. In the early days of Guild, I was definitely a big critic, especially if you've seen, but it seems like he's really figured it out. He's really added that extra little bit of thought behind exactly when to aggress, how to really control your opponent's mind and stop them from playing the map the way that they want to. And as soon as you force your opponents to adapt to you, you're winning the game immediately. Like they are on the back foot, you're comfortable, and Yassine does that better than literally anyone I can think of.
How confident are we about G2? Because they would potentially go up against like an F. If they lose to VGIA, that's another story, right? Giants are so hard to predict right now because they're just on a hot streak. But this team's looking pretty complete after these changes. Yeah, Avova's just fucking. The team's great to watch. Mm-hmm. What do you think about them in an FPX matchup? How are they positioned here? And do you think they're actually one of the teams, one of the 4 that make it out of this tournament?
Well, they only need to beat. So they need to make it to the upper final, right, to guarantee qualification, and that does mean that the FPX game would be qualifying. As a roster, I think this G2 esports team has more potential than they've ever had before, than the brand of G2 has had since the day that they lost their winning streak and things kind of went to shit. Kellogg's is unrealized potential. He is already accepted as a very strong player, and I guarantee we have only seen half of what that man has to offer. You add on to that the likes of Lowkii, who I say again and again is one of the best players in the world and will be, I think, to a more exaggerated extent as time goes on. This is definitely a team that I expect to qualify. Like if we were to go through the EU teams that I expect to see up there, or the EMEA, excuse me, it would be G2, it would be Liquid, you'd have FPX and probably Gambit. But there's so much room for potential in terms of upsetting there, in terms of, you know, Guild coming out and surprising us. I could see Guild make it over Liquid. If they end up facing each other, which is possible with this bracket, I would see Guild and Liquid as a 50-50 game, really.
I don't have
Okay.
Liquid getting through.
You think Liquid will make it through?
I don't.
You don't
No,
have Liquid getting through. Okay,
No,
okay.
I have Ascend, FPX, Gambit, G2.
Ascend, FPX, Gambit, G2. Yeah, okay. We're in the similar boathouse. Well, what is it about Liquid that makes you think they're not going to get through? Is there anything in particular, or is it just more general?
The way that my bracket plays out, they drop to Ascend in the uppers, and then they have to fight their way through Guild and G2.
Yeah,
and I think exactly. I think that like that is just too much of a gauntlet for them. The way that I see Liquid, and the way I've seen them for months at this point, is that they're a very feast or famine team. They're very peaky. And I think saying, all right, Liquid, string together multiple wins against extremely high caliber teams, like based off of precedent, I just can't count on them to deliver that.
I get that. I think I'm with you.
Okay. In that sense, then, Mitch, who is getting through in your opinion? Who makes it out of this bracket and goes to Berlin?
Well, yeah, Ascend for sure, G2 for sure. Like those two teams look incredibly strong right now. I'm a big fan of both of them and how they play. Moving past that, I see Liquid, I see Giants as potential, Guild also in that kind of potential bracket. Gambit should make it through. So Ascend, Gambit, G2, and then a combination of the probably FPX would be the other team then. So it's like basically all the teams in the upper quarterfinals except Supermassive plays.
But there's upset potential with Na'Vi, Liquid, and Giants, you feel, yeah?
Na'Vi, Liquid, Guild, Giants. Yeah, I think those are. So basically,
EMEA brackets where everyone can win.
Yeah, I'm in the fucking Vanity camp. I think all these guys are really good players, are really nice guys. And I think as long as everyone enjoys themselves, they all get points. They'll get points. They'll get to go to the last chance qualifier. Maybe all the teams can make it in, and we'll have a great, happy family for champions. Woo!
Nailed it. Just fucking sublime performance there. Oh dear! Shout out Vans. Obviously, he's watching the show. Thanks for joining us, buddy. I mean, this all kicks off in like what, 2 days? 2 days. Challengers finals happening in Europe here. It's all happening this week, very, very soon. I can't wait. Guys, we got to the end of our content for the show today, but Anders, what's coming up for you, man? What's next in your world?
Oh, man. So let's see. Over the next couple of weeks, I mean, we've got crazy prep with the Virtuoso guys, and then we're going into NSG Summer Champs. That is our Super Bowl. We are so deep in the shop for that that we expect to put up some impressive results there. Like, we are going into that with confidence built on months and months of work. So that is the biggest thing on my plate.
I mean, Virtuoso, one of the teams to watch in that tournament for sure. And it's a desirable one to be in. Cloud9 Blue just turned around and gone, fuck, we need to qualify for this. And they've obviously managed to do so. Mitch, can we expect to see you on the broadcast, mate, for the Challengers finals?
That is announced. So yes, EMEA playoffs. I'll be on the broadcast. That to juggle through my head. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah, I will be. I also really want to get an EU coach or analyst on at some point, just so you can finish with that question and just see the juxtaposition of. So what have you got coming up? Well,
how little there is.
Nothing. Yeah. I'm going to dinner with my mom next week. That should be nice. And a few scrims. That would be enjoyable. But yeah, gonna be a good few weeks coming up.
Yeah, hopefully we get more news about stuff. Maybe Blast actually, step up and announce something. Keep your eyes peeled for that, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Valoranting. We'll catch you next week. And, oh man, it's going to be a long episode. We're going to have a lot to work through, obviously, as, our Challengers finals will be pretty much decided. So stay around for that one. We'll see you then 11 a.m. PT next week right here. Of course, you can find us on youtube.com/Valoranting. We are at Valoranting on Twitter. But until next week, have a good one. We'll see you soon.